The warning klaxons aboard the mining vessel Fortune's Edge had been screaming for the past 3 hours, their red emergency lights casting hellish shadows across the cramped bridge. Captain Sarah Chen wiped the sweat from her brow as she stared at the sensor readings, trying to make sense of what her equipment was telling her.
"Ma'am, we're picking up something strange on long-range scanners," reported Lieutenant Marcus Webb, his fingers dancing across the navigation console. "It's not showing up as any known ship configuration in our databases." Sarah leaned over his shoulder, studying the ghostly blip on the screen. The Fortune's Edge was a small operation, just 12 crew members working the outer rim of the Kepler 442 system, mining rare earth elements from the asteroid belt that stretched between the system's twin suns. They were 3 months into what was supposed to be a routine 6-month expedition, and until now, the most exciting thing they'd encountered was a particularly large chunk of platinum. "Distance?" Sarah asked.
"Approximately 40,000 kilometers drifting with the asteroid field," Webb replied. "Whatever it is, it's not under power. Dead in space." Dr. Elena Vasquez, the ship's chief science officer, looked up from her own console, where she'd been monitoring the distress signal they'd first detected 12 hours ago. "Captain, the signal is definitely coming from that object. It's weak, barely registering, but it's there." Sarah made a decision that would change the course of her life forever. "Set course to intercept. Let's see what we're dealing with." The Fortune's Edge was not built for speed or elegance. She was a working ship, her hull scarred from countless encounters with asteroid debris, her systems practical rather than sophisticated. But she was sturdy and reliable, and 30 minutes later, they had closed the distance to their mysterious target. What they found defied explanation. The vessel was unlike anything in human databases. Roughly the size of a small transport shuttle, its hull seemed to shimmer with an oily, iridescent quality that made it difficult to focus on. Strange geometric patterns covered its surface, not quite symmetrical, as if designed by minds that didn't think in straight lines and right angles. "Life signs?" Sarah asked. "Doctor." Vasquez ran her scanners over the craft multiple times before responding. "This is odd. I'm reading what might be life signs, but they're so faint I can barely detect them. If there's someone alive over there, they won't be for much longer." Sarah felt the familiar weight of command settle on her shoulders. Space was unforgiving, and death was always just one equipment failure away. But the universal law of the void was clear. You helped those in distress, no matter who they were or where they came from. It wasn't just regulation, it was what separated civilization from chaos. "Prepare a boarding party," she ordered. "Webb, you're with me. Vasquez, I want you analyzing everything you can about that ship's composition and technology. Rodriguez, prepare the medical bay for potential casualties." Chief Engineer Carlos Rodriguez nodded grimly. "Aye, Captain. Should I prep the quarantine protocols?" Sarah paused. First contact with an alien species was supposed to follow strict Earth Federation guidelines. There were procedures, protocols, entire departments dedicated to managing such encounters. But those protocols assumed healthy, communicating aliens interested in diplomacy, not dying beings trapped in a derelict ship millions of kilometers from the nearest Federation outpost. "Prep everything," she decided. "We'll sort out the bureaucracy later." An hour later, Sarah and Webb stood in the airlock, checking their environmental suits one final time. The alien vessel had no compatible docking systems, so they'd had to use magnetic anchors to secure the ships together and cut through the hull with plasma torches. "Ready, Captain?" Webb asked, his voice tinny through the comm system. Sarah activated her suit's recording systems and stepped through the makeshift breach they'd cut in the alien hull. What she found on the other side would haunt her dreams for years to come. The interior of the ship was a nightmare of organic curves and crystalline structures that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. The air was thin but breathable, though her suit's sensors detected trace amounts of gases that were mildly toxic to humans. But it wasn't the alien architecture that made her gasp, it was the bodies. 2 adult aliens lay crumpled near what appeared to be some kind of control station. They were tall, perhaps 8 feet in height, with elongated limbs and skin that had a translucent quality, revealing complex circulatory systems beneath. Their faces were almost insectoid, with large compound eyes that had long since lost their luster. "Jesus Christ," Webb whispered. Sarah knelt beside the nearest body, her scanner confirming what was obvious to the naked eye. "They've been dead for days. Looks like they died from, I don't know, starvation? Exposure?" She was about to stand when she heard it. A sound so faint she almost missed it. A weak, barely audible whimpering that seemed to come from deeper within the ship. Webb, did you hear that? Hear what, ma'am? Sarah moved toward the source of the sound, navigating through the alien corridors by following the weak distress signal that Dr. Vasquez had detected. The ship was small, and it didn't take long to locate what appeared to be a living area. What she found there broke her heart.
In a small alcove that might have been a sleeping area, surrounded by empty containers that probably once held food, lay the smallest alien she'd ever seen. It couldn't have been much bigger than a human infant, its translucent skin stretched tight over a clearly malnourished frame.
Its large eyes, proportionally huge compared to the adults, tracked her movement with obvious intelligence despite its weakened state. "Oh my God," Sarah breathed. "Webb, get over here. Now." The alien infant, for that's clearly what it was, made that soft whimpering sound again, a cry that transcended species barriers. It was the universal sound of a child in distress, and Sarah felt something primal awaken in her chest. "It's just a baby," Webb said in amazement, his voice soft with awe. Sarah's scanner confirmed her visual assessment. The infant was severely dehydrated and malnourished, its vital signs so weak that her equipment could barely detect them. But it was alive, and that was what mattered. "Can we even help it?" Webb asked. "I mean, it's not human. We don't know what it eats, what it breathes, what might kill it." Sarah looked down at the dying infant, its large eyes fixed on her face with what she could only interpret as hope. She thought about Federation protocols, about xenobiology procedures, about the dozens of regulations that govern first contact situations. Then, she thought about those regulations being written by people who had never looked into the eyes of a dying child, alien or otherwise. "We're not letting it die," she said firmly. "Not on my watch." The next hour was a whirlwind of activity as the crew of the Fortune's Edge worked to save their unexpected patient. Vasquez had managed to analyze the alien physiology enough to determine that its basic biological needs were similar to humans. It needed water, some form of nutrition, and a stable environment. The empty containers in the ship had traces of what appeared to be a nutritional paste, and the ship's databanks, partially intact, provided enough information for Vasquez to synthesize something that might work. "I'm not a pediatric specialist, and I'm definitely not a xenobiologist," Dr. Vasquez warned as she prepared a feeding solution. "This is all educated guesswork." "It's dying anyway," Sarah pointed out. "At least this way we're trying." The infant was so weak it couldn't even cry properly when they moved it to the medical bay. Sarah found herself volunteering to hold the small creature while Dr. whispered. Vasquez worked to establish some form of nutrition delivery system. The alien baby was surprisingly warm, its skin softer than she'd expected, and its large eyes never left her face. "I think it recognizes you as the one who found it," Dr. Vasquez observed, adjusting the feeding tube she'd managed to create. "Look how it calms down when you're holding it." Sarah looked down at the alien infant in her arms. It had stopped whimpering and was now making soft cooing sounds, its tiny hand-like appendages curled around her finger with surprising strength. Despite its obviously non-human appearance, there was something universally infant-like about it that triggered every protective instinct she possessed.
"What do we call it?" Webb asked.
"I mean, we can't just keep saying the alien baby." Sarah considered this. They had no idea what the infant species called themselves or what its parents might have named it. The alien ship's computers were too damaged to provide much useful information beyond basic life support data. "Hope," she said finally. "We'll call it Hope." Over the following days, the crew of the Fortune's Edge threw themselves into the task of keeping Hope alive. Engineer Rodriguez rigged up a specialized environmental chamber that maintained the atmospheric conditions the infant seemed to prefer. Professor Vasquez worked around the clock to refine the nutritional formula, making adjustments based on how Hope responded to different mixtures. Communications Officer Lisa Park managed to extract partial data files from the alien ship's computers, trying to piece together information about Hope's species and what had happened to its parents. The story that emerged was heartbreaking. The alien family appeared to have been refugees, fleeing from something that Park's translation software rendered only as the consuming dark. Their ship had suffered critical systems failure just as they'd reached the outer edge of the Kepler 442 system. The parents had used the last of their resources to send out a distress signal, hoping someone would find their child before it was too late. "They were running from something," Park reported during one of the daily briefings. "I can't get clear details, but whatever this consuming dark is, it was bad enough that they chose to flee into deep space rather than face it."
Hope, meanwhile, was showing remarkable progress.
What had seemed like certain death just a week earlier had transformed into cautious optimism. The infant was responding well to the nutritional formula, Its vital signs were strengthening, and it was becoming increasingly active and alert. More importantly, it seemed to have formed a distinct bond with Sarah, becoming agitated whenever she was away for too long. "It's remarkable, Dr. Corbar," Vasquez observed, watching Hope play with a simple toy that Rodriguez had fashioned from spare parts. Most infant mammals form primary attachments to their birth parents. The fact that Hope has bonded with you suggests a level of cognitive flexibility that's quite advanced. Sarah didn't care about the science. She only cared that every day, Hope seemed a little stronger, a little more alive. The alien infant had somehow worked its way into the hearts of every crew member aboard the Fortune's Edge. Rodriguez had started carving wooden toys during his off shifts. Park was learning lullabies from a dozen different human cultures to sing to Hope. Even gruff Chief Petty Officer Thompson had been caught making funny faces to get the baby to laugh. Because Hope could laugh. It was a sound unlike anything Sarah had ever heard. Almost like crystalline wind chimes mixed with human giggling, but it was unmistakably the sound of a happy child. "Captain," Webb said during the end of their second week with Hope, "we're going to have to make a decision soon. Our mining contract expires in 3 months, and we need to decide whether we're heading back to Federation space or extending our mission." Sarah knew this moment had been coming. She also knew that bringing an alien infant back to Federation space would immediately trigger a chain of events that would take Hope away from them. There would be military debriefings, scientific studies, diplomatic considerations. Hope would become a specimen rather than a person. But keeping Hope with them in the Outer Rim meant giving up any hope of returning to normal lives. The Fortune's Edge was a mining vessel, not equipped for long-term care of an alien infant. They had limited medical supplies, limited food synthesis capabilities, and no legal authority to make decisions about Hope's future. As if sensing her turmoil, Hope made one of its cooing sounds from the medical bay where Dr. Vasquez was conducting its daily health assessment. Sarah found herself drawn to check on the infant, as she had countless times over the past 2 weeks. Hope had grown noticeably during its time with them. Its skin had lost the translucent, unhealthy appearance and taken on a more vibrant, opalescent quality. Its large eyes were bright and alert, tracking movement with obvious intelligence. When it saw Sarah enter the medical bay, it made excited sounds and reached toward her with its small hands. "Someone's happy to see Mama, Dr. Coram," Vasquez said with a smile. Sarah felt something twist in her chest at the word Mama. She'd been trying not to think of herself in those terms, trying to maintain some professional distance. But as she picked up Hope and felt the infant settle contentedly against her chest, she realized that professional distance was a luxury she'd lost the moment she'd decided to save this small life. "The question," Dr. Vasquez continued more seriously, "is what we do now. Hope is healthy and thriving, but it's going to need more than we can provide long-term. It needs education, socialization with its own species if possible, and medical care that's specifically designed for its physiology." Sarah looked down at Hope, who was making soft humming sounds while playing with the fabric of her uniform. The infant trusted her completely, depended on her for everything. The thought of handing it over to Federation bureaucrats who would see it as a first contact opportunity rather than a person made her feel physically ill. "There has to be another option," she said quietly. That night, as the Fortune's Edge drifted through the asteroid field, Sarah found herself in the observation lounge, staring out at the stars while Hope slept peacefully in a portable crib beside her. The infant seemed to sleep better when she was nearby, something that both warmed her heart and terrified her with the responsibility it implied. She was so lost in thought that she almost missed the proximity alarm that began chiming softly from the bridge. Sarah gently picked up the sleeping Hope and made her way to the command center, where Webb was frowning at the sensor displays.
What is it?
She asked quietly, not wanting to wake the baby. "Multiple contacts approaching from the inner system," Webb reported. "Configuration unknown, but they're moving fast, and they're heading directly for us."
Sarah felt a chill run down her spine.
They were alone in the Outer Rim, officially just a mining operation working under a standard commercial license. Who would be looking for them out here? Unless someone had noticed their extended stay in this area. Unless someone had detected the alien technology they'd been studying. "Time to intercept?" she asked. "At current velocity, approximately 6 hours," Webb calculated. "Should I start warming up the engines?" Sarah looked down at Hope, who was beginning to wake up from the noise and activity on the bridge. The infant looked up at her with those large, trusting eyes, making soft, questioning sounds. Whatever was coming toward them through the darkness of space, she had a feeling their peaceful interlude was about to come to an end. But as she looked at Hope, Sarah realized that she would face whatever was coming head-on. She'd found something precious in the cold depths of space, something worth protecting at any cost. The universe was about to discover what happened when someone threatened a child that a human had claimed as family. The approaching ships resolved on the Fortune's edge's sensors like predators emerging from the cosmic dark. Sarah stood on the bridge, Hope cradled in one arm while she studied the tactical display with growing unease. The vessels were unlike anything in Federation databases, sleek, angular craft that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, their hulls bristling with weapon systems that her computer couldn't identify but definitely didn't like. "Captain!" Communications Officer Lisa Park called from her station, her voice tight with tension. "We're being hailed. The signal is strange. It's using protocols I've never seen before, but our universal translator is managing to make sense of it." "Put it through," Sarah ordered, settling Hope more securely in her arms. The infant seemed to sense the tension in the air and had become unusually quiet, its large eyes fixed on the view screen. The face that appeared on the main display was humanoid, but definitely not human. The being had angular features with skin that looked like polished obsidian and eyes that glowed with an internal red light. When it spoke, its voice carried harmonics that made Sarah's teeth ache. "Primitive vessel," the alien said, its words carrying contempt that needed no translation. "You are harboring stolen property. Return the young Zephyrian to us immediately, and your deaths will be swift." Sarah felt her blood run cold. "Zephyrian? You're talking about the infant we rescued?" The alien's glowing eyes narrowed. "Rescued? You have interfered with a lawful extermination. The spawn of the betrayer species must not be allowed to survive. Their very existence is an affront to galactic order." "Extermination? Doctor?" Vasquez had arrived on the bridge and was staring at the screen in horror. "You're talking about murdering a baby. We are talking about preventing the spread of genetic corruption that has already consumed 17 star systems," the alien replied coldly. "The Zephyrians carry within their DNA the seeds of universal destruction. They must all be eliminated before they can reproduce and spread their taint further." Sarah looked down at Hope, who was making soft, worried sounds while looking between her and the screen. The infant's parents hadn't just been refugees. They'd been running from a genocidal campaign designed to wipe out their entire species. "Well," Sarah said, her voice deadly calm, "that's not happening." The alien on the screen seemed genuinely surprised by her response. "You would risk your lives for a contaminated creature that is not even your species? This defies all logic." "Maybe," Sarah replied. "But we're human. Logic isn't always our strong suit." She looked directly into those glowing red eyes. "But protecting children from monsters? That's what we do best." The transmission cut abruptly, leaving the bridge of the Fortune's edge in tense silence. Hope made a questioning sound and reached up to touch Sarah's face with one small hand, as if trying to comfort her. "Ma'am," Lieutenant Webb said quietly, "we're severely outgunned. Our mining lasers and basic defensive systems won't stand a chance against military hardware like that." "Options?" Sarah asked, though she already suspected she knew the answer. "We could try to run," Chief Engineer Rodriguez said over the intercom from the engine room. "But they're faster than us, and we're in the middle of an asteroid field. Not a lot of room to maneuver." "We could surrender," Dr. Vasquez suggested reluctantly. "Try to negotiate." Sarah looked down at Hope, who was gazing up at her with complete trust. The idea of handing this innocent child over to beings who wanted to murder it for the crime of existing made her feel sick. "No," she said firmly. "We don't negotiate with child killers." Over the next 2 hours, as the alien ships closed the distance to the Fortune's edge, Sarah's crew worked frantically to prepare for what everyone knew was a hopeless fight. Rodriguez pushed the ship's engines and defensive systems well beyond their design limits. Park sent out distress signals on every frequency, hoping someone might be close enough to respond. Dr. Vasquez created emergency medical supplies and prepared the sickbay for casualties, but it was Chief Petty Officer Thompson who came up with the idea that might actually save them. "Captain," the gruff veteran said, approaching Sarah in the corridor outside the medical bay where she'd been sitting with Hope, "I've been thinking about our situation, and I have a proposal." "I'm listening," Sarah said, gently rocking Hope, who had been fussy since the alien transmission. "The asteroid field," Thompson said. "We've been mining here for 3 months. We know every rock, every debris field, every gravitational anomaly in a 50,000-kilometer radius. They don't." Sarah's eyes lit up with understanding. "You want to use the asteroids as cover. More than that," Thompson grinned. I want to use them as weapons. Rodriguez has been complaining that we've got excess mining charges stacked in the cargo bay. What if we planted some of those charges on key asteroids and triggered them when our friends get close? It was desperate, dangerous, and probably suicidal. It was also the first plan that offered them any hope of survival. Do it, Sarah ordered. The next few hours were a blur of activity. While the alien ships approached, teams from the Fortune's Edge used shuttlecraft to plant mining charges throughout the asteroid field, turning chunks of rock and ice into improvised weapons. It was exhausting work made more difficult by the need to avoid detection, but the crew threw themselves into it with grim determination.
Sarah found herself thinking about the crew's motivation as she watched them work.
They could have voted to surrender, could have decided that one alien infant wasn't worth their lives, but instead, they'd unanimously chosen to fight impossible odds, rather than abandon hope to genocide. Maybe that was what made humans different from the cold-eyed killers hunting them. Maybe that was why Hope's parents had sent their distress signal toward human space, rather than toward their own kind or any of the other species that shared the galaxy. Maybe they'd heard something about humans that made them believe their child would be safe with them. The alien ships entered the outer edge of the asteroid field just as Hope began crying. Not the soft sounds of discomfort that Sarah had grown used to, but sharp, distressed wails that seemed to tear at her heart. Dr. Vasquez came running from her laboratory. Something's wrong, the doctor said, quickly scanning Hope with her medical equipment. Its vital signs are spiking. Heart rate, neural activity, everything. Sarah looked down at Hope, whose large eyes were now filled with what looked like tears. The infant was looking toward the main view screen, where the approaching alien ships were visible as dark specks among the asteroids. It knows they're here, Sarah realized with a chill. Somehow, it knows what's coming. On the bridge, proximity alarms began sounding as the alien ships moved deeper into the asteroid field. The lead vessel was less than 10,000 kilometers away and closing fast. Sarah could see weapon ports opening along its dark hull like the eyes of some deep space predator. Charges are in position, Captain, Thompson reported. We've got a chain of explosives spread throughout the field. When they hit the trigger zone, we can bring down enough rock to hopefully disable or destroy at least some of their ships. And if it doesn't work? Webb asked. Thompson's grin was wolfish. Then we go down fighting, and maybe buy enough time to get one last message to Federation space about what happened here. The lead alien ship was now close enough for detailed scans. Sarah could see that it was even more heavily armed than she'd initially thought, with weapon systems that could probably vaporize the Fortune's Edge with a single shot, but it was also moving confidently through the asteroid field, apparently unconcerned about the hazards of navigating through dense debris. That confidence was about to become a liability. Wait for it, Sarah murmured, Hope's cries growing louder in her arms. The infant seemed to understand that death was approaching, and its distress was breaking her heart. The alien ship passed the first marker asteroid, then the second. Its escorts were spread out in a standard military formation, covering each other's blind spots and maintaining overlapping fields of fire, professional killers who had probably done this many times before. Now, Sarah ordered. The asteroid field erupted in a chain of explosions that lit up space like a string of newborn stars. Carefully placed mining charges detonated in sequence, sending massive chunks of rock and metal spinning toward the alien vessels at tremendous velocity. The lead ship tried to evade but was moving too fast to avoid the debris field that suddenly engulfed it. Sarah watched in grim satisfaction as the alien vessel's shields flared and failed under the barrage of high-velocity rocks. Its hull cracked like an egg, atmosphere and debris spilling out into the vacuum. But her satisfaction was short-lived, as the other two ships emerged from the debris cloud damaged but still very much functional. Direct hit on the lead vessel, Webb reported. It's dead in space, but the other two are still coming, and they look angry. The surviving alien ships opened fire, their weapons painting the asteroid field with beams of energy that vaporized everything they touched. The Fortune's Edge shook under the impact of near misses, and Sarah could hear Rodriguez cursing creatively over the intercom as he fought to keep the engines online.
Return fire with mining lasers, Sarah ordered, knowing it was largely pointless.
Their industrial equipment was never designed for ship-to-ship combat, but something unexpected happened. Instead of the weak, scattered beams Sarah expected, the mining lasers seemed to focus and intensify as they fired. Streams of energy that should have been barely capable of scratching military armor cut through the alien ship's shields like they were paper. What the hell? Webb stared at his weapons console in amazement. Captain, our weapons are operating at about 300% normal efficiency. That's not possible, Doctor. Vasquez looked up from her scanner readings with an expression of wonder. It's Hope, she said quietly. Look at this. On her screen, Hope's biological readings showed impossible levels of neural activity. The infant had stopped crying and was now staring intently at the view screen, its large eyes glowing with the same opalescent quality as its skin. "I don't understand," Sarah said. "I think Hope is somehow boosting our systems." "Doctor," Vasquez explained, "Zephyrian neural patterns are unlike anything I've seen. They might have some kind of technopathic abilities. Whatever Hope was doing, it was working. The Fortune's Edge's weapons continued to fire with impossible accuracy and power, carving through the alien ship's defenses like they were made of tissue paper. Within minutes, both vessels were drifting hulks, their crews dead or dying. As the last alien ship's lights flickered and died, Hope settled back into Sarah's arms with a contented sigh. The infant's eyes had returned to their normal appearance, and it was making the soft cooing sounds that indicated it felt safe and protected. "Well?" Webb said into the stunned silence. "That was unexpected." Sarah looked down at Hope, who was now playing contentedly with her fingers as if nothing had happened. The infant had just saved all their lives, and it was acting like it had simply solved a minor problem. "Dr. Vasquez," Sarah said slowly, "what exactly are we dealing with here?" The doctor was staring at her readings with the expression of someone trying to understand a completely new form of physics. "I have no idea. The neural patterns I recorded during the battle suggest cognitive abilities that are off any chart I've ever seen. Hope isn't just intelligent. It might be operating on a level of consciousness that we can't even comprehend." Sarah thought about the alien's words about genetic corruption and universal destruction. If Hope's species possessed abilities like what they'd just witnessed, she could understand why someone might see them as a threat. But the idea of murdering children because they might someday become powerful was so fundamentally wrong that it made her feel sick. "Captain," Park called from the communications station, "I'm receiving transmissions from the wreckage of the alien ships. It looks like automated distress signals. Can you block them?" "I can try, but they're using quantum entanglement communication. The signals are probably already reaching their destination." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. They'd won this battle, but if more ships were coming, the Fortune's Edge couldn't fight off an entire fleet, even with Hope's mysterious abilities. "How long do we have?" she asked. Park worked at her console for several minutes before responding. "Based on the signal characteristics and what we know about this region of space, I'd estimate between 6 and 12 hours before reinforcements arrive." Sarah looked around the bridge at her crew. They were tired, scared, and probably beginning to realize the magnitude of what they'd gotten themselves into by choosing to protect Hope. They could have surrendered after the first battle, could have explained that they were just innocent miners who'd made a mistake. But they'd chosen to fight instead, and now they were all targets. "Options?" she asked. "We could try to reach Federation space," Webb suggested. "If we push the engines beyond Redline, we might make it to the outer patrol routes. With Hope's apparent abilities, we might be able to outfight small groups of pursuit ships," Thompson added. "But we can't run forever." Sarah stood on the bridge, Hope sleeping peacefully in her arms, and realized that everything had changed. They weren't just miners anymore. They weren't even just refugees. They'd become the protectors of something that might be the last of its kind, something that apparently had abilities that could reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. The responsibility was terrifying. But as she looked down at Hope's sleeping face, Sarah knew that she wouldn't trade places with anyone else in the universe. This small, helpless being had trusted them with its life, and they'd proven worthy of that trust. Now they just had to figure out how to keep it alive long enough to grow up. "Set course for the outer system," Sarah decided. "We're going to find somewhere safe to think about our next move." "And Park?" "Yes, Captain." "Start composing a message to Federation Command. It's time they learned about the genocide happening in their backyard." As the Fortune's Edge turned away from the debris field and began accelerating toward the outer system, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they'd just taken the first step on a journey that would change everything. Hope stirred in her arms, opening its large eyes to look up at her with complete trust. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Human and alien, bound by something deeper than species or biology. They were family now, and no force in the galaxy was going to tear them apart. 3 weeks after the battle in the asteroid field, the Fortune's Edge limped into the outer reaches of the Tau Ceti system. Her engines running on fumes and her crew running on determination. Sarah stood on the bridge, Hope babbling contentedly in her arms as she watched the sensor displays with tired eyes. They'd been running for weeks, jumping from system to system, always staying ahead of the pursuit ships that seemed to find them no matter how well they hid. "Captain," Lieutenant Webb said quietly, We're running out of options. Fuel reserves are at 12%, and we've got major damage to the port engine array. Sarah nodded grimly. She'd known this moment was coming. The Fortune's Edge was a tough ship, but she wasn't built for the kind of running battle they'd been fighting. More importantly, Hope was growing fast, faster than should have been possible, and its needs were becoming more complex every day. Any response to our Federation distress calls? She asked Communications Officer Park. Nothing official, Park replied with frustration. But I have been picking up some interesting chatter on the intelligence frequencies. Word is spreading about a human mining crew that's been giving the hegemony a bloody nose. Quote, the hegemony. That was what they'd learned to call the alliance of species that was systematically exterminating the Zephyrians. Not a formal government, but a loose confederation of races united by fear and hatred of Hope's people. According to the intercepted communications they'd been monitoring, the hegemony had been pursuing this genocide for nearly a decade, claiming the Zephyrians posed an existential threat to galactic civilization. Any good news? Sarah asked wearily. Doctor, Vasquez looked up from the medical station where she'd been monitoring Hope's development. Actually, yes. I've been analyzing the data we recovered from the Zephyrian ship, and I think I know why Hope's people were considered so dangerous. Sarah settled into the captain's chair, adjusting Hope so the infant could see the main view screen. Over the past weeks, Hope had developed an almost obsessive interest in star charts and navigation displays, studying them with an intensity that was remarkable for any being, let alone one that was barely a few months old. Tell me, Sarah said. The Zephyrians weren't just technopaths, Dr. Vasquez explained. They were evolutionary catalysts. Their neural field interactions didn't just affect technology, they affected other living beings. Prolonged exposure to Zephyrian neural patterns could trigger accelerated evolution in neighboring species. You mean they could make other species smarter?
More than that.
They could help other species reach their full genetic potential in generations instead of millennia. The data I've recovered suggests that 17 different species made extraordinary technological and social advances after establishing contact with Zephyrian colonies. Sarah felt a chill of understanding. That's why the hegemony wants them extinct. They're afraid of what contact might do to their own societies. And, exactly. The hegemony species have built their power structures around maintaining technological and intellectual superiority over their subject races. Zephyrian influence could level the playing field completely. Hope made a pleased gurgling sound and reached toward the star chart display. As its small hand came near the screen, the navigation system began highlighting optimal routes through nearby star systems, calculating fuel efficiency and tactical advantages with impossible precision. Is it helping with our navigation? Webb asked in amazement. It's been doing that for days, Sarah replied with a fond smile. I think Hope is trying to help us find somewhere safe. As if in response to her words, the navigation system suddenly focused on a small, unremarkable system about 2 days' travel away. The display showed a yellow star with 6 planets, one of which was highlighted in the kind of green that indicated habitable conditions. New Canaan, Park read from the Stellar database. Independent colony, established about 40 years ago by religious refugees from the core worlds. Population approximately 50,000, primarily human with small populations of Centaurians and Deltans. Why would Hope be interested in a farming colony? Webb wondered. Sarah studied the information displayed on the screen. New Canaan was listed as a neutral world, not affiliated with any major government. More importantly, it was classified as a sanctuary world, a place where refugees and outcasts could find shelter without questions being asked. Maybe because it's exactly what we need, she realized. Somewhere we can rest and figure out our next move. The journey to New Canaan took 36 hours of careful navigation through the outer system's asteroid belt. Hope seemed fascinated by the approach, its large eyes tracking their progress with obvious intelligence. More than once, the infant's apparent navigation suggestions helped them avoid patrol routes that might have led to unwanted encounters. When New Canaan finally appeared on the view screen, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in weeks: hope. The planet was beautiful, with blue oceans and green continents that spoke of careful terraforming and sustainable development. Orbital platforms showed signs of modest but sophisticated technology, and the communication traffic indicated a peaceful, well-organized society. We're being hailed, Park announced. Local Space Control wants to know our intentions. Put them through, Sarah ordered. The face that appeared on the screen belonged to a middle-aged human woman with kind eyes and prematurely grey hair. She wore the simple uniform of a colonial administrator, but carried herself with the confidence of someone used to dealing with unexpected situations. "This is Administrator Elena Rodriguez of New Canaan Space Control," the woman said. "You're flying a damaged mining vessel, and our sensors are showing some unusual energy signatures. Do you require assistance?" Sarah made a quick decision. After weeks of running and hiding, she was tired of lies and half-truths. "Administrator Rodriguez, this is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth Federation vessel Fortune's Edge. We're carrying a refugee child whose life is in danger. We request sanctuary under Galactic Refugee Protection Protocols." Rodriguez's expression grew serious. "Captain Chen, sanctuary is freely offered to all who come to New Canaan in good faith. But I should warn you that we've been receiving inquiries from some very unpleasant people who seem to be looking for someone matching your description."
The hegemony, Sarah said grimly.
"That's what they call themselves, yes. Bring your ship down to Landing Field 7. We'll discuss the situation once you're safely on the ground." 6 hours later, Sarah found herself sitting in Administrator Rodriguez's office, Hope sleeping peacefully in a portable crib beside her chair. The colonial administrator had listened to their story without interruption, her expression growing more troubled with each detail. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," Rodriguez said finally. "You rescued what you believed was an orphaned alien infant. When the child's species enemies arrived to complete their genocide, you chose to fight them rather than surrender the child." "That's correct," Sarah confirmed. "And this child apparently has abilities that allowed your mining ship to defeat military vessels?" Sarah looked down at Hope, who was making soft sounds in its sleep. "Hope saved our lives. We couldn't have survived without its help." Rodriguez leaned back in her chair, studying Sarah's face. "Captain, do you have any idea what you've gotten yourself into?" "I'm beginning to," Sarah replied honestly. "But it doesn't change anything. Hope is just a child. It doesn't deserve to die because some people are afraid of what its species might become." Rodriguez smiled, and Sarah realized she'd given the right answer. "Captain Chen, 40 years ago, my grandparents came to this world because they refused to abandon their beliefs when their government decided those beliefs were inconvenient. New Canaan was founded by people who understood that sometimes doing the right thing means standing against the entire universe." "You'll help us." "We'll do more than that," Rodriguez promised. "We'll give you a home." The next few months passed like a dream Sarah had never dared to imagine. The people of New Canaan welcomed them with the kind of open-hearted generosity that made Sarah understand why refugees from across the galaxy sought shelter there. The crew of the Fortune's Edge was given citizenship, homes, and most importantly, a purpose. Hope thrived in the peaceful environment of the colony. The infant grew at an astonishing rate, both physically and intellectually. Dr. Vasquez, now serving as the colony's chief medical officer, documented abilities that challenged every assumption about intelligence and development. Hope was walking within weeks, communicating through a combination of sounds and apparent telepathic impressions, and showing problem-solving skills that surpassed most adult humans. More remarkably, Hope's presence seemed to be having exactly the effect that Dr. Vasquez had predicted. The colonists who spent time around the young Zephyrian began displaying enhanced cognitive abilities, increased creativity, and improved problem-solving skills. The colony's agricultural yields increased dramatically as farmers developed intuitive understanding of crop rotation and soil management that had previously required years of study. "It's remarkable," Dr. corroborated. Vasquez told Sarah one evening as they watched Hope play with a group of human children in the colony's Central Park. "The effect is subtle but measurable. Everyone who spends time with Hope is becoming more than they were before." Sarah nodded, watching Hope interact with its human playmates. The alien child had learned to control its abilities to some degree, no longer accidentally interfacing with every piece of technology it encountered. But its influence on the people around it was impossible to hide. "That's going to be a problem eventually," she realized. "People are going to notice that something special is happening here." Her prediction proved accurate sooner than expected. 3 months after their arrival on New Canaan, Administrator Rodriguez called an emergency meeting of the Colony Council. Sarah arrived to find the room filled with worried faces and tense voices. "We have a problem," Rodriguez announced without preamble. "Federation intelligence has been asking questions about our recent improvements in agricultural productivity and technological innovation. More importantly, hegemony scouts have been detected at the edge of our system." "How long do we have?" Sarah asked. "Probably not long," Rodriguez admitted. "The hegemony has been systematic in their hunt for Zephyrian survivors. They've destroyed 3 other refugee colonies in the past year, claiming they were harboring genetic contaminants. Sarah felt her blood run cold. She'd brought Hope here to find safety, but instead she'd put an entire colony at risk. 50,000 innocent people were now targets because they'd chosen to shelter one alien child. "We could leave," she offered reluctantly. "Take Hope and run again before they arrive." "Where would you go?" asked Dr. Sarah Kim, the colony's head of education. "Every system you enter puts more people at risk, and Hope is just a child. It deserves to grow up somewhere safe, not spend its life running from killers." "There might be another option," said Marcus Webb, who had become the colony's head of security. "We know the hegemony is afraid of what Hope represents. What if instead of running, we show them that their fears are unfounded?" "How do we do that?" Sarah asked. "By demonstrating that Hope's influence creates cooperation, not conquest," Webb explained. "The hegemony claims that Zephyrian neural patterns lead to chaos and destruction. But look at what's happened here. Our crime rate has dropped to almost zero. Our productivity has increased dramatically, and different species are working together more effectively than ever before." Hope chose that moment to toddle into the meeting room, having apparently escaped from its caretakers again. The young Zephyrian had developed a talent for appearing wherever important decisions were being made, as if it understood that its future was being discussed. Sarah picked up Hope, who gurgled happily and began playing with her hair. The alien child had grown from the dying infant she'd found in the derelict ship into a healthy, curious toddler, with an infectious laugh and an apparently bottomless capacity for affection. "The question is," Rodriguez said quietly, "are we prepared to make a stand? Because once the hegemony arrives, there won't be any going back. We'll be committed to protecting Hope, no matter the cost." Sarah looked around the room at the faces of the people who had become her family. These colonists had risked everything to give her and Hope a home. Now she was asking them to risk everything again to keep that home. "I can't ask you to fight a war for us," she said quietly. "You're not asking," Dr. Kim replied firmly. "We're volunteering. Hope isn't just your child anymore, it's our child too, and we don't abandon family." The decision was unanimous. New Canaan would make its stand. Over the following weeks, the entire colony threw itself into preparation for what they all knew was coming. The Fortune's Edge was repaired and upgraded with the help of Hope's technological insights. Defensive systems were installed throughout the settlement, and evacuation plans were prepared for the colony's most vulnerable residents. But perhaps most importantly, Hope began working with the colony's scientists and engineers to develop technologies that no one had ever imagined. The young Zephyrian's ability to interface directly with computer systems, combined with its apparently intuitive understanding of advanced physics, led to breakthroughs in energy production, defensive shielding, and communication systems. "It's like having access to 1,000 years of scientific advancement," marveled Dr. Grade, James Park, the colony's head of research. "Hope doesn't just solve problems, it shows us entirely new ways of thinking about the universe." Sarah found herself thinking about the hegemony's fears as she watched Hope work with the human scientists. She could understand how some species might see this level of rapid advancement as threatening. But what the hegemony members failed to understand was that Hope's influence wasn't about dominance or conquest, it was about cooperation and growth. The young Zephyrians seemed to instinctively understand that true progress came from working together, not from imposing one's will on others. Every innovation, every breakthrough, every advancement was shared freely with anyone who wanted to learn. On a quiet evening 6 weeks after the council meeting, Sarah sat in the colony's central park watching Hope play with a group of human, Centaurian, and Deltan children. The alien child was teaching the others a complex game that seemed to involve both physical coordination and mental puzzle solving, and all the children were laughing as they struggled to keep up. "Beautiful sight," said Administrator Rodriguez, settling onto the bench beside Sarah. "They're just children playing," Sarah replied. "Exactly," Rodriguez said with a smile. "Children of 3 different species, working together to solve problems and having fun while they do it. That's what Hope represents. Not the end of individual cultures, but the beginning of a truly cooperative galactic civilization." Sarah nodded, watching Hope patiently help a small human boy understand the rules of the game. The young Zephyrian had never shown the slightest sign of impatience or frustration with those who couldn't match its abilities. Instead, it seemed to take joy in helping others reach their potential. "The hegemony ships will be here soon," Rodriguez said quietly. "I know," Sarah replied. "Are you ready?" Rodriguez was quiet for a moment, watching the children play. "Sarah, 40 years ago my grandparents stood in front of a Federation tribunal and refused to recant their beliefs, even though it meant exile from everything they'd ever known. They told me that some things are worth any sacrifice." She stood up, brushing dust off her simple colonial dress. "I understand now what they meant. Hope isn't just one child, it's the future of what we could all become. That's worth fighting for. As if summoned by her words, Hope broke away from the other children and ran to Sarah, its large eyes bright with affection. The young Zephyrian climbed into her lap and settled against her chest with the complete trust that still took her breath away. Looking down at Hope, Sarah realized that Rodriguez was right. This wasn't just about one alien child anymore. It was about the choice between a universe ruled by fear and one guided by hope. The hegemony represented everything dark about galactic civilization, the willingness to commit genocide rather than risk change, the determination to maintain power at any cost. But hope represented something better, something worth fighting for. 3 days later, long-range sensors detected the approaching hegemony fleet. 12 warships, enough firepower to sterilize an entire world. Sarah stood on the bridge of the rebuilt Fortune's Edge, Hope in her arms, and watched the enemy ships emerge from hyperspace like dark angels of death. The final battle was about to begin. The hegemony fleet emerged from hyperspace like a swarm of mechanical locusts, their dark hulls blotting out the stars as they arranged themselves in a perfect attack formation around New Canaan. Sarah stood on the bridge of the Fortune's Edge, now serving as the flagship of New Canaan's hastily assembled defense fleet, and counted 12 massive warships against their 6 converted civilian vessels. Hope sat in a specially designed command chair beside her, no longer the helpless infant she'd rescued months ago, but still unmistakably a child. The young Zephyrian's eyes glowed with concentration as it interfaced with the ship's systems, its neural patterns enhancing their defensive capabilities in ways that defied conventional understanding of technology. Incoming transmission, Communications Officer Park announced, her voice tight with tension. The face that appeared on the main view screen was different from the obsidian-skinned alien they'd encountered in the asteroid field, but the expression of cold hatred was exactly the same. This being appeared more reptilian, with scales that shifted color as it spoke, and eyes that burned with fanatical intensity. "Inhabitants of the contaminated world," the alien commander said, its voice carrying harmonics that made Sarah's skin crawl. "You harbor a genetic abomination that threatens the stability of galactic civilization. Surrender the Zephyrian spawn immediately, and your deaths will be swift. Continue to resist, and we will demonstrate why 13 species have already learned to fear the hegemony's justice." Sarah stepped forward, Hope climbing down from its chair to stand beside her. The young Zephyrian reached up to take her hand, its small fingers intertwining with hers, in a gesture of absolute trust. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of New Canaan," she replied, her voice carrying across the communication link to every ship in both fleets. "The being you call an abomination is a child named Hope. It has never harmed anyone, never threatened anyone, and has brought nothing but joy and advancement to our world. If you want to harm this child, you'll have to go through every human on this planet." The alien commander's scales shifted to a deeper red. "You speak of advancement as if it were a gift. The Zephyrian's neural contamination has already corrupted 17 star systems, turning ordered societies into chaos. We have spent decades cleansing the galaxy of their influence. What you call chaos, we call growth." "Doctor," Vasquez interrupted, stepping into the communication range. "The Zephyrians don't destroy cultures. They help them reach their full potential. You're committing genocide because you're afraid of change. We are preserving galactic stability," the commander snarled. "The natural order demands hierarchy, control, predictability. The Zephyrian influence destroys all of these, creating societies where inferior beings believe themselves equal to their betters." Hope made a soft sound that Sarah had learned to recognize as sadness. The young Zephyrian looked up at her with its large, expressive eyes and spoke in the clear, melodic voice it had developed over recent months. "They're afraid," Hope said simply. "They think growth means losing themselves. But growth means becoming more than you were. I can show them if they'll let me." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "Hope, no, it's too dangerous." But Hope was already moving, its small form walking toward the communication console with determination that was heartbreaking in its innocence. "They hurt my family because they were scared. They hurt other families because they were scared. Maybe if they understand, they won't be scared anymore." The alien commander was staring at Hope through the view screen, its reptilian features twisting with disgust and hatred. "The abomination speaks. How perfectly it mimics the appearance of innocence while carrying the seeds of galactic destruction." Hope stopped in front of the communication console and looked directly into the camera, its opalescent skin beginning to glow with soft inner light. When it spoke, its voice carried harmonics that seemed to resonate through the quantum communication link itself. "I am Hope of the Zephyrians," the child said. And Sarah realized that for the first time, Hope was speaking not as a human-raised child, but as a representative of its own people. My family sent our knowledge into the dark between stars because they believed someone would be kind enough to save one small life. They were right. The alien commander raised a scaled hand to cut the transmission, but something strange was happening to the communication link. Hope's neural patterns were somehow propagating through the quantum entanglement field, and Sarah could see the effects on the hegemony commander's expression. For just a moment, the hatred and fanaticism flickered, replaced by something that might have been uncertainty. "You seek to contaminate us through your words," the commander said, but its voice lacked the absolute conviction it had carried before. "I seek to share understanding," Hope replied gently. "You fear that my people's gift will destroy your culture, but culture is not a thing that can be destroyed by growth. Culture is the story a people tell about themselves, and growth only makes that story richer." On the tactical display, Sarah could see the hegemony ships beginning to move into attack position. But she could also see something else. Several of the vessels were showing signs of internal chaos, as if their crews were experiencing some kind of confusion or conflict. "Hope's neural field is propagating through their communication systems," Dr. Vasquez observed quietly. "It's affecting their crews." "Is that bad?" Sarah asked. "I don't know," Vasquez admitted. "But look at the biometric readings I'm picking up from their ships. Stress levels are dropping, aggression indicators are decreasing. It's like Hope is calming them." The alien commander seemed to be struggling with some internal conflict, its scales shifting rapidly between colors. You use your mental contamination to cloud our judgment. This proves the danger you represent." "I offer only truth," Hope said sadly. "Your people have built their power on the belief that some beings are naturally superior to others. But what if that belief is wrong? What if every being has the potential for greatness given the right nurturing?" "Impossible," the commander snarled, but its conviction was wavering. "The natural order demands hierarchy. Without strong guidance from superior beings, lesser species fall into chaos and self-destruction." "Then why?" Hope asked with the devastating logic that only children possess. "Are you trying to destroy us for helping others become stronger? If we were truly causing chaos, wouldn't the chaos destroy itself without your intervention?" Sarah watched in fascination as the hegemony commander struggled with this question. Around them, she could see signs that Hope's influence was spreading through the enemy fleet. On several ships, weapons systems were powering down as crew members apparently questioned their orders. But not all of the ships were affected. The largest vessel, flying at the center of the formation, seemed immune to Hope's influence. As Sarah watched, it began moving toward New Canaan, its massive weapon arrays charging with deadly energy. "Commander, we are detecting weapons targeting our primary population centers," Lieutenant Webb reported grimly. "That big ship isn't playing games." Hope's glow suddenly intensified, and the young Zephyrian turned to Sarah with an expression of terrible understanding. "The big ship has a machine mind," it said quietly. "No living crew. They made it so my influence couldn't reach them. An automated dreadnought," Sarah realized with horror, "designed specifically to be immune to Zephyrian neural patterns." The commander on the screen seemed to be fighting some kind of internal battle, but the unmanned dreadnought continued its approach, its weapons charging to full power. Whatever doubt Hope had managed to instill in the hegemony crews, the robotic warship felt no such uncertainty. "All ships, full defensive formation," Sarah ordered. "Prepare for—" She was interrupted as the space around New Canaan suddenly filled with new contacts. Dozens of ships were emerging from hyperspace, but these weren't the dark predatory vessels of the hegemony. These ships bore the distinctive markings of the Earth Federation, and they were moving with the precision of a military fleet that meant business. "This is Admiral Catherine Reyes of the Earth Federation 4th Fleet," came a voice over the communication system. "All hostile vessels will stand down immediately and prepare to be boarded." Sarah felt a surge of hope that had nothing to do with the alien child beside her. The Federation had finally responded to their desperate messages, and they'd brought enough firepower to make even the hegemony think twice. But her hope faded as she realized the scale of the forces involved. Even with Federation support, they were still outnumbered, and that automated dreadnought was still approaching the planet with obvious hostile intent. "Hope," she said quietly, kneeling down to look the young Zephyrian in the eyes. "I need you to listen to me very carefully. Can you do something about that big ship?" Hope's expression grew solemn. "I can try, but it's different from the others. Its mind is made of metal and light, not thoughts and feelings. I'm not sure how to talk to it." "What about talking to the people who made it?" Sarah suggested. Can you reach back through its communication links to whoever is controlling it? Hope's eyes widened with understanding, and its skin began to glow more brightly. Yes, I can follow the signals back to their source. But Sarah, the young Zephyrian, hesitated, using the name it had adopted for her. If I reach that far, I might change things I don't mean to change. The hegemony leaders might become different than they were before. Sarah thought about this for a moment. The implications were staggering. Hope was talking about potentially altering the fundamental psychology of an entire species' leadership through quantum-entangled communication links. Would you be hurting them? She asked. No, Hope said immediately. I can only share what I am. I can't force anyone to become something they don't want to be. But if they let me show them who they could become... The child trailed off, its expression thoughtful. On the tactical display, the automated dreadnought was entering weapons range of New Canaan's major cities. Earth Federation ships were moving to intercept, but Sarah could see they wouldn't reach it in time. Do it, she decided. Show them what you showed me. Hope nodded solemnly and placed its small hands on the communication console. The young Zephyrian closed its eyes, and suddenly the entire ship was filled with a sensation that Sarah could only describe as profound peace. It was the feeling of a mother holding her child, of coming home after a long journey, of knowing that no matter what happened, you were exactly where you belonged. Through the communication link, she could see the effect spreading. The hegemony commander's expression was changing, its features softening as decades of hatred and fear began to dissolve under the weight of Hope's simple, unconditional love. What? What are you showing me? The commander whispered. The truth about what I am, Hope replied, its young voice carrying across space to touch minds that had known only anger and fear. I am a child who wants to help others grow. My people were teachers, not conquerors. We shared our gift because sharing made everyone stronger. The automated dreadnought suddenly stopped its approach, its weapons powering down as emergency override commands flooded its communication systems. Through the quantum links, Hope's influence had reached the hegemony leadership itself, and they were experiencing something they'd never felt before. The genuine desire to nurture rather than destroy. This feeling, the commander said, its voice filled with wonder. This is what you offer, this sense of belonging, of purpose beyond conquest. This is what every being deserves to feel, Hope said gently. The knowledge that they are valued, that they can grow, that they have something unique to contribute to the galaxy. Across the hegemony fleet, weapon systems powered down as crew members experienced the same revelation their commander was going through. For the first time in generations, they were feeling what it meant to want to build something rather than tear it down. The automated dreadnought, receiving new orders from a suddenly transformed leadership, turned away from New Canaan and began broadcasting a message that would echo across the galaxy. This is the Hegemony Fleet Command. All genocide protocols are hereby terminated. All species previously marked for extermination are granted full protection under new hegemony law. The age of fear is ending. The age of growth begins now. Admiral Riaz's voice came over the communication system, filled with amazement. Captain Chen, what the hell just happened out here? Sarah looked down at Hope, who was swaying slightly from exhaustion, but smiling with the pure joy of a child who had just made new friends. The future happened, Admiral, and it's brighter than any of us imagined. But even as she spoke, Sarah knew that this was just the beginning. Hope had just demonstrated abilities that would reshape the political landscape of the galaxy. Every species, every government, every power structure would want to either control or destroy what the young Zephyrian represented. The battle for Hope's life was over, but the battle for Hope's future was just beginning. As if reading her thoughts, Hope looked up at her with those large, trusting eyes. Sarah, does this mean I can go home now? Sarah felt her heart break a little as she realized what Hope meant. The young Zephyrian was asking if it could return to its own people, not understanding that it was probably the last of its kind. You are home, sweetheart, she said softly, gathering Hope into her arms. Wherever we are, wherever we go, that's home, because we're family. Hope smiled and settled against her chest with the complete trust that had never wavered, not even when they were facing impossible odds. Family, the young Zephyrian repeated happily. I like that word. As the combined human and former hegemony fleets began working together to establish new diplomatic protocols, Sarah held Hope close and watched the stars wheel overhead. She thought about the journey that had brought them here. From a dying alien infant in a derelict ship to a child whose very existence had changed the course of galactic civilization. But more than that, she thought about the simple truth that Hope embodied. That love was stronger than fear. that growth was better than stagnation, and that sometimes the most important thing you could do was protect something small and helpless until it became strong enough to protect others. The galaxy had learned today that humanity would fight to the death for a child that wasn't even their species. That lesson would resonate across the stars for generations to come, changing how every civilization thought about cooperation, protection, and the true meaning of strength. Hope was safe. And because hope was safe, everyone was a little safer. 5 years after the Battle of New Canaan, Sarah Chen stood in the observation deck of the newly christened USS Hope's Dream, watching the dedication ceremony for the Galactic Cooperation Institute taking place on the planet below. Through the transparent aluminum windows, she could see representatives from over 200 species gathered in the Institute's central courtyard, their diverse forms creating a tapestry of galactic civilization that would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. "Sarah, are you ready?" came a melodic voice from behind her. Sarah turned to see Hope approaching, no longer the small child she'd rescued, but now a young adolescent whose opalescent skin gleamed with health and happiness. The young Zephyrian had grown both physically and intellectually at an astonishing rate, but had retained the gentle spirit and infectious optimism that had changed the course of galactic history. "As ready as I'll ever be," Sarah replied with a smile. "Are you nervous about your speech?" Hope's large eyes sparkled with amusement. "Should I be? I'm only addressing the largest gathering of galactic leaders in recorded history to discuss the future of interspecies cooperation." "When you put it like that, it does sound intimidating," Sarah laughed. Over the years, Hope had developed a distinctly human sense of humor to go along with its Zephyrian wisdom, a combination that never failed to delight her. They made their way to the transport shuttle that would take them down to the planet's surface. The Institute had been built on New Canaan as a symbol of what could be achieved when different species worked together toward common goals. What had started as a small farming colony had become the diplomatic center of the galaxy, all because one community had chosen to protect a single alien child. The shuttle pilot was Lieutenant Marcus Webb, now Captain Webb, and commander of the Institute's security forces. "Good morning, Captain Chen Hope," he said with the easy familiarity of old friends. "Ready to make history again?"
We don't make history, Hope replied thoughtfully.
"We just try to do the right thing and let history sort itself out." As they descended through New Canaan's atmosphere, Sarah reflected on how much had changed since that desperate battle 5 years ago. The transformation of the hegemony from a genocidal alliance into the galaxy's most enthusiastic supporters of interspecies cooperation had been just the beginning. Hope's demonstration that growth and change could be beautiful rather than threatening had sparked a renaissance of scientific discovery, artistic expression, and social progress that was still accelerating. The former hegemony species had thrown themselves into the work of undoing decades of damage with the fervor of converts. The reptilian commander who had once threatened to destroy New Canaan, now calling himself Ambassador Seeker of Truth, had become one of Hope's closest friends and most dedicated protectors. The obsidian-skinned beings who had first pursued them through the asteroid field now served as the Institute's most effective mediators, their former ruthlessness transformed into passionate advocacy for justice and understanding.
"Look at that crowd," Webb observed as they approached the landing pad.
"Must be 50,000 beings down there. Remember when the biggest crowd on New Canaan was the Harvest Festival?" Sarah nodded, watching the massive gathering through the shuttle's windows. She could see humans working alongside beings she didn't even recognize, all united by a common purpose that would have seemed impossible just a few short years ago. The Institute itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering, designed by architects from dozens of different species, and built using technologies that had emerged from the unprecedented collaboration between former enemies. Its organic curves and crystalline towers seemed to grow from the planet's surface like a living thing, beautiful and functional in ways that no single species could have achieved alone. "Sarah," Hope said quietly as they prepared to land, "thank you." "For what?" Sarah asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. "For seeing me as a child instead of a weapon. For protecting me when everyone else saw only what I represented. For making me part of your family." Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes. "Hope, you saved us as much as we saved you. Maybe more."
We saved each other,
Hope corrected gently. "That's what family does." The ceremony that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Representatives from species that had been enemies for millennia stood side by side, their children playing together while their leaders discussed peaceful solutions to conflicts that had raged for centuries. Admiral Reyes, now serving as the Federation's ambassador to the Institute, introduced Hope to the massive crowd with words that would be remembered for generations. 5 years ago, a dying alien child taught the galaxy that love is stronger than fear, that growth is better than stagnation, and that the measure of any civilization is not how it treats the powerful, but how it protects the helpless. Pope took the podium with the confidence of someone who had grown up surrounded by love and support from hundreds of different species. When the young Zephyrian spoke, its voice carried clearly across the vast courtyard, translated simultaneously into thousands of languages and dialects. My friends, Hope began, I stand before you today not as a representative of the Zephyrian people, for I may be the last of my kind. I stand before you as a child of the galaxy, raised by humans but claimed as family by all of you. The crowd was absolutely silent, hanging on every word. 5 years ago, Captain Sarah Chen found me dying in a ship between the stars. She could have left me there. It would have been safer for her and her crew, but she chose to save one small life, not knowing that this choice would change everything. Pope paused, its eyes finding Sarah in the VIP section and sharing a moment of silent communication. Today, I want to tell you what Captain Chen's choice really meant. She didn't just save one Zephyrian child. She proved that compassion is the most powerful force in the universe. She demonstrated that when we choose to protect those who cannot protect themselves, we become more than we ever thought possible. Across the crowd, beings of every shape and size were nodding in agreement, many with tears streaming down faces that had never known such emotions before. Hope's influence had touched their lives. The institute we dedicate today represents us.